Hello children. Today we are going to find out a little bit more about our book from our literacy lessons, The Iron Man. Now we've read chapter 1 and we know quite a bit about the Iron Man and what he looks like. And we've read halfway through chapter 2 where Hogarth met the Iron Man on a dark night after a fishing trip. And when he went home, his father believed him, but some of the other farmers didn't. But they decided to have a meeting and to decide what to do about this iron giant. Let's find out what they decided to do. They couldn't call the police or the army because nobody would believe them about this iron monster. They would have to do something for themselves. So what did they do? At the bottom of the hill, below where the Iron Man had come over the high cliff, they dug a deep, enormous hole. A hole wider than a house and as deep as 3 trees on top of one another. It was a colossal hole, a stupendous hole, and the sides of it were as sheer as walls. They pushed all the earth off to one side. They covered the hole with branches, and the branches they covered with straw, and the straw with soil. So they finished the hole. It looked like a freshly ploughed field. Now on the side of the hole opposite the slope up to the top of the cliff, they put a rusty old lorry. That was the bait. Now they reckoned the Iron Man would come over the top of the cliff out of the sea. He'd see the old lorry, which was painted red. He'd come down to get it and chew it up and eat it. But on his way to the lorry, he'd be crossing the hole. And the moment he stepped with his great weight on that soil held up with only straw and branches, he would crash through into the hole and would never get out. They'd find him there in the hole. Then they'd bring a few bulldozers and earth movers that hadn't already been eaten, and they'd push the pile of earth on top of him and bury him forever in the hole. They were certain now that they'd get him. Next morning, in great excitement, all the farmers gathered along to examine their trap. They came carefully closer, expecting to see hands tearing at the edge of the pit. They came carefully slower. The red lorry stood just as they had left it. The soil lay just as they had left it, undisturbed. Everything was just as they had left it. The Iron Man had not come. Nor did he come that day. Next morning, all the farmers came again. Still, everything lay just as they had left it. And so it went on, day after day. Still, the Iron Man never came. Now the farmers began to wonder if he would ever come again. They began to wonder if he had ever come at all. They began to make up explanations of what had happened to their machinery. Nobody likes to believe that an iron monster eats tractors or cars. Soon, the farmer that owned the red lorry they were using as bait decided that he needed it, and he took it away. So there lay a beautiful deep trap without any bait. Grass began to grow on the loose soil. The farmers talked of filling the hole in. After all, you can't leave a giant pit like that. Somebody might fall in. Some stranger coming along might just walk over it and fall in. But they didn't want to fill it in. It had been such hard work digging it, and besides, they all had a sneaking fear that the Iron Man might come again. And that hole was their only weapon against him. At least they put up a little notice, "Danger! Keep off!" to warn people away. And they left it at that. Now the little boy Hogarth had an idea. He thought he could use the hole to trap a fox. He found a dead hen one day and threw it out on the loose soil over the trap. Then towards evening he climbed a nearby tree and waited. A long time he waited. A star came out. He could hear the sea. Then there, standing at the edge of the hole, was a fox, a big red fox, looking towards the dead hen. Hogarth stopped breathing. The fox stood without moving, out towards the hen, but he did not step out onto the trap. Slowly he walked around the wide patch of raw soil till he got back to where he'd started, sniffing all the time out towards the bird. But he did not step out onto the trap. Was he too smart to walk out there, where it was not safe? But at that moment he stopped sniffing. He turned his head and looked towards the top of the cliff. Hogarth, wondering what the fox had seen, looked towards the top of the cliff. There, enormous in the blue evening sky, stood the Iron Man on the brink of the cliff, gazing inland. In that moment, the fox vanished. Now what? Hogarth carefully, quietly, hardly breathing, climbed slowly down the tree. He must get home and tell his father. But at the bottom of the tree he stopped. He could no longer see the Iron Man against the twilight sky. Had he gone back over the cliff into the sea? Or was he coming down the hill? In the darkness under the high skyline towards Hogarth and the farms. Then Hogarth understood what was happening. He could hear a strange tearing and creaking sound. The Iron Man was pulling up the barbed wire fence that led down the hill. And soon Hogarth could see him as he came nearer, tearing the wire from the fence post, rolling it up like spaghetti and eating it. The Iron Man was eating the barbed fencing wire. But if he went along the fence eating as he moved, he wouldn't come anywhere near the trap, which was out in the middle of the field. He could spend the whole night wandering about the countryside along the fences, rolling up the wire and eating it, and never would any fence bring him near the trap. But Hogarth had an idea. In his pocket, among other things, he had a long nail and a knife. He took these out. Did he dare? His idea frightened him. In the silent dusk, he tapped the nail with the knife blade together. Clink, clink, clink. At the sound of the metal, the Iron Man's hands became still. After a few seconds, he slowly turned his head, and the headlamp eyes shone towards Hogarth. Again, clink, 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 went the nail on the knife. Slowly, the Iron Man took 3 strides towards Hogarth and stopped again. It was now quite dark. The headlamp shone red. Hogarth pressed close against the tree trunk. Behind him and the Iron Man lay the wide lip of the trap. Clink, clink, clink. Again he tapped the nail on the knife. And now the Iron Man was coming. Hogarth could feel the earth shaking under the weight of his footsteps. Was it too late to run? Hogarth stared at the Iron Man, looming, searching towards him for the taste of metal that had made that inviting sound. Clink, 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 went the nail on the knife, and crash! The Iron Man vanished. He was in the pit. The Iron Man had fallen into the pit. Hogarth went close. The earth was shaking as the Iron Man struggled underground. Hogarth peered over the torn edge of the great pit. Far below, 2 deep red headlamps glared up at him from the pitch blackness. He could hear the Iron Man's insides grinding down there, and it sounded like a big lorry grinding its gears on a steep hill. Hogarth set off. He ran home with the great news. And as he passed the cottages on the way, and as he turned down the lane towards his father's farm, he was shouting, "The Iron Man's in the trap! We've caught the Iron Giant!" When the farmers saw the Iron Man wallowing in their deep pit, they sent up a great cheer. He glared up towards them, his eyes burning from red to purple, from purple to white, from white to fiery, whirling, black and red, and the cogs inside him ground and screeched. But he could not climb out of the steep-sided pit. Then, under the lights of the car headlamps, the farmers brought bulldozers and earth pushers, and they began to push in on top of the struggling Iron Man all the earth they had dug out when they first made the pit, and that had been piled off to one side. The Iron Man roared again as the earth began to fall on him. But soon he roared no more. Soon the pit was full of earth. Soon the Iron Man was buried, silent, packed down under all the soil, while the farmers piled the earth over him in a mound and in a hill. They went to and fro over the mound with their new tractors, which they'd bought since the Iron Man ate all their old ones, and they packed the earth down hard. Then they all went home talking cheerfully. They were sure they had seen the last of the Iron Man. Only Hogarth felt sorry. He felt guilty. It was he, after all, who had lured the Iron Man into the pit. And that's the end of chapter 2. Quite a lot to think about there. How was Hogarth feeling? It was a good idea to make the sound of the metal, wasn't it? The clink, clink, clink sound. But how's he feeling at the end of chapter 2? Is Hogarth quite as excited as he was at the beginning? Lots to think about. Thank you, children. Chapter 3 will follow soon. Bye-bye.